Bron Williams here. One of the things I've observed for women is that we often do not trust the voices that we have. We've been told to sit down, be quiet, and play small. One of my goals in the Language of Leadership workshop and masterclasses that I run is to enable women to connect back with their intrinsic voice, to give them strategies to be able to approach leadership in a way that is authentic with who they are, and to trust the power that is theirs. Too often, women do not trust the power that they have because there's been far too much messaging around what a woman should do, could do, can't do, may not do. And too often we have taken that messaging on board. What I've observed when I speak about women rediscovering and reconnecting with their power is sometimes a sense of skepticism, that subtle eye roll, that feeling that, well, really, it's not necessary. After all, women hold positions of authority and power, and they often have thriving businesses. But when I talk about women rediscovering and reconnecting with their power, I am talking about something much deeper that goes far beyond positional power and success. Because in most cultures, women have been denied positional authority, both systematically and systemically. And often positional authority has been deemed the only legitimate form of power. And therefore women have been judged purely on external achievements, like having a thriving business or a position of authority. But there is a much deeper power within women that goes beyond what meets the eye, and it transcends external markers and societal definitions. And it is this power that I help women access to rediscover and reconnect with, a power that has been deemed unworthy and illegitimate for far too long. Women can and do achieve amazing things, but there is an even greater potential within women waiting to be unleashed, and it is this internal power that is both innate and organic that has the capacity to change the world. Hi, welcome to the Language of Leadership Masterclass. I'm Bron Williams. This masterclass has come out of my many years of study and interest in why people do what they do, starting with my role as a teacher and school principal, through the many years I spent working with the Salvation Army, including working with asylum seekers on Nauru, and now into my speaking and mentoring business, working with women to enable them to rediscover and reconnect with their power. As a lover of words, language has always been important to me, especially how we use words and the impact that words have on shaping our attitudes and actions. My goal is to celebrate the unique ways in which women lead, both themselves and other people. So often we take for granted our unique leadership style because it comes instinctually to us. I want to start unpacking what women do naturally so that we can celebrate how we lead and have confidence using that leadership style in an intentional way. This workshop is called The Language of Leadership because I first want to look at the use we make of words as leaders, what we do with words, and how our words impact how we lead ourselves and other people. Let me bring up the PowerPoint so that you can see what I am talking about, and this will match with the workbook as well. First of all, let me tell you a story from my life. I grew up in a generation whose parents were raised on the principle that children should be seen and not heard. That principle wasn't strongly applied in our family, but neither were we seen as individuals with real ideas of our own. We were just the kids. Added to that, mine was a conservative Christian family whose social life revolved around the church on Sundays and attending other events connected with the church community, many of which were lots of fun, like the church camps, the social dinners, and the dances in the hall. But the dominant, often only voices of authority were male, and I grew up trusting the words of men and believing that men had the right way of looking at the world. So fast forward 40 years. In the 6 years it took me to complete an honours degree in theology, I noticed that very few women writers were among the recommended reading for the subjects I undertook. On my bookshelf, 100% of the writers were men. The words of women were only read in snippets and often confined to the realms of feminist or liberation thought. Women's voices were rarely heard in the mainstream. On a personal level, words have been used against me to silence me by questioning the validity of what I'm saying. You know, things like, oh, what are you banging on about? Or you're so strident, or Bronwyn, be quiet. Although I'm a person of words and a wordsmith, I have at times felt uncertain about speaking my truth out of concern for the sensibilities of others. There has been a subtle fear that my thoughts and words are of no value, no matter how loudly I say them. In varying relationships, men have attempted to silence me by telling me what and when I could share details of my life or my interpretation of events. And in the past, I have complied because confrontation is not something I find easy to do and from which, like many people, I shy away. While silence may be golden, as the old saying goes, if it's used as a space for reflection or used to foster innovation and the development of new ideas, and it's beautiful when it's a space inhabited by both men and women. However, silence is only truly golden if it's a place of freedom and not confinement. It takes courage to speak up when our voices are small or have been silenced for a long time, and it takes practice and a safe place to start. The first step is to trust your voice, and you can see this page in your workbook. The first step in developing strength to speak when we're used to being silenced is to decide to trust your voice. This is not about how we feel. We know what it's like to feel silenced, to have our thoughts dismissed, to be spoken over in meetings, to have our ideas scoffed at, only to be taken up and presented by a man. So this is not a time to trust our feelings because they have been shaped by our experiences. Now is the time to make a choice to trust what we have to say. This is deliberate and intentional. It's a choice we must make more than once. It may mean we make this choice every day or even every hour until the intentional choice has become a habit we do without thinking. It's easy to make a decision, but it gets hard to follow through when we've got default ways of thinking and behaving. Like any new pattern of behaviour, learning to trust that what we have to say is valid involves an ongoing pattern of decisions. I can decide today that I'll trust what I have to say, but when an idea gets challenged or I have an opportunity to say what I really think, it's easy to clam up, to fall back onto the ways that we've always done things, the ways we've been taught. Keep quiet, keep the peace. What I have to say doesn't really matter. When we're tempted to do what we've always done, to let others silence us, now is the time to pause. Pausing allows even a millisecond of time to pass in which we can take note of whether we are going to return to our old ways of thinking. This pause allows us to decide, do I really want to step into the new ways of operating? Do I really want to trust my own voice? If the answer is yes, then we can open our mouths rather than clam up. We can express our idea rather than defaulting to another's point of view. There is still no guarantee that we'll be heard, but we need to make the choice about what we do with our voices. How often do you hold back from saying what you think or from expressing an idea because you don't know how it will be received? Or you're afraid you'll be ridiculed, or that someone will immediately jump back at you with an opposing idea and you won't feel safe defending your position. Conversely, where do you always feel safe to say whatever's in your head? Who are the people you never have to explain yourself to? They just get what you're saying. Who are the people you can say anything to and they won't take offence? Take a couple of minutes now to identify the people you feel safe to say anything to. Write them down now inside this safe place on the safe place page. Now, what is it about these people that make you feel safe? Is that you've known them for a long time? Are they good listeners? Do they tell you what they think or tell you they think you're wrong, but in a way that still makes you feel safe? Take a couple of moments now to think about that too. Make some notes on this page. These people that you've identified are the people who are your safe place. They're the ones you can go to when you need to bounce a new idea around. Maybe an idea you want to present at your next work meeting, or a new way of working in your business that feels a bit edgy to you. Be intentional about using these people as your sounding boards. It's no accident that they're in your life. Once you've got a clear idea in this safe place, you'll have more confidence to speak it out in places that feel less safe, like that team meeting or with a client. Of course, there's no guarantee that your idea will be accepted, but because you have the confidence in it, because you've talked it through in your safe place, when it's challenged, you'll have more confidence defending the idea clearly, and you are less likely to beat yourself up for your perceived failure to convince others about how good your way of thinking is. We can never change how other people respond to what we think and present, but we can manage how we respond to their criticism, and we can have confidence in what we bring to the table. Oh, that's a funny looking thing. Look at that. I need to practice writing practice. The E has fallen off. There's an old saying that practice makes perfect, but it doesn't. There's no such thing as the perfect swim or the perfect gymnastics routine or the perfect piece of art. And all the people who complete professionally or make a living from their creative skills certainly put in the practice. Instead of practice makes perfect, let's choose practice means progress. There's always more we can do and achieve.
We will often stumble when we're practicing a new skill, like trusting our voice. But just because we stumble doesn't mean we've failed. It doesn't mean we should stop or that we're not good enough. Practice means progress. I'm better today than I was yesterday. Yes, you may still get spoken over in the team meeting, but practice sharing your ideas. Remember, your ideas as a leader are valid. And you don't know who's watching you. Who is secretly cheering you on? Who is quietly taking note of how you keep using your voice? Who is encouraged by the fact that you lead yourself well? Question for you. What did you believe growing up? Now, I'm not talking about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy. Those are stories we outgrow. I'm thinking more of the stories we take with us into adulthood about who we are, our place in the world, what we should or shouldn't do, what we can or cannot be. I'm thinking of the stories that shape the perceptions we have of ourselves, the stories that shape the perceptions that others have of us, the stories we live by. Let me tell you one of my stories. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a conservative Christian family. My mum and dad both worked for the Commonwealth Bank, which for those outside Australia is one of Australia's leading banks. That's where they worked when they met. But once they married, Mum had to relinquish her position. In the early 1950s, married women were not able to hold a position as they were potentially taking a job from a married man who had a family to support. As their eldest child, there were unwritten expectations that I absorbed as the norms for my life, including that marriage and children were the prime role for a woman. And I did just that. I left my role as a teacher when I started to try for a family, and raising my sons became the focus of my life. Now, I'm not denigrating that role. It is wonderful and a very fulfilling role. But if I felt I had other choices, I would have chosen another course, a greater focus on academia and much less on getting married and having a family. It took a troubled marriage that I couldn't save, no matter how hard I tried, separation and divorce, for me to really consider that I could shape a new story for my life, that I no longer needed to live within the parameters and boundaries my family and faith culture told me were the only options for women. It takes courage to challenge the long-held beliefs that we have. It takes courage to examine what we've believed and decide if it remains true, helpful, useful, or appropriate in our lives. And then it takes courage to step away from those long-held beliefs and forge a new story. But it can be done. I did it. Because I want to look at this idea of identity, because what we have to say and want to say is intimately tied up with who we are and who we think we are. The idea of identity is a broad one and covers such concepts as individuality, uniqueness, distinctiveness, character, and personality. Identity includes different relationships that we make, such as being our parent's child, a friend, a partner, and as a parent. Identity involves external characteristics over which we have little or no control, like our height or socioeconomics class into which we were born. But identity also includes our political viewpoints and our moral and ethical attitudes, all of which unconsciously influence the choices we make each day. Given its breadth of meaning, I want to narrow the focus to how we see ourselves. We get told lots of stories about who we are and how we should show up in the world. Let me tell you about the patchwork girl. Like all little girls, she was born perfect, but she didn't know that. As she grew, her parents would say, Be a good girl, don't do that. They'd tell her what a good girl should do. Each of those words and ideas was like a patchwork piece that was sewn over who she really was. The patchwork girl started school and her teacher said, "Stand here, sit up straight, don't scratch, don't talk in class, you can't do that." And the patchwork girl allowed her teachers to sew more patchwork pieces over her, who she really was, adding a new piece here and another patch there. Friends told her how she should behave, what she should wear, how she should speak. And she let them sew more patchwork pieces over who she really was. As she grew older, not only did the patchwork girl let other people sew patchwork pieces onto her, but she also started looking for pieces to sew onto herself, because that must be what you do as an adult. Become what people say you should be, act the way other people say you should act, think what other people say you should think. She became very adept at finding new pieces to stitch onto the patchwork. And that was her life. A piece here, a patch there, all different shapes, sizes and colours, all being sewn over who she really was. The patchwork girl thought this must be what being beautiful looked like, because she had long ago forgotten who she really was, forgotten that she was beautiful, forgotten what she needed, forgotten that she was perfect in every way. Until one day, she felt she could no longer take one more piece of patchwork being added to her life. The stitches were pulling terribly. The weight was awful. Everything hurt. And so she made the decision to start unpicking some of the patchwork pieces, a patch here, a piece there. This hurt too, but not as much as the weight of the patchwork pieces of other people's needs and other people's expectations that she'd been carrying for so long. Some of the patchwork pieces were easy to remove. Snip, 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 and the piece fell away. Some were stitched with big stitches that went deep inside. It was the pieces that were closest to her heart that were the hardest to unstitch, the ones that had been sewn on the longest. Finally, one day, all the patchwork pieces were gone. She no longer had any pieces of the patchwork of other people's expectations, other people's needs. She could see who she really was. She discovered that she was beautiful and she was perfect. And she is me. And she is us. Whether we're trans, gay, straight, cis, non-binary, able-bodied, disabled, older, younger, all of us are like that patchwork girl. We've all had pieces of other people's needs and expectations added to our lives, often to the extent that we can no longer see who we truly are. So, how do we go about getting back to ourselves? Is we notice the cues that trigger a response in ourselves. These cues are telling us that something is going on that we haven't yet identified cognitively. Now, cues can be physical, a churning stomach, tensed shoulders, and they can be emotional, feeling angry, frustrated, insecure, afraid, uncertain. Whereas the physical cues I often feel are a weight on my chest when something doesn't feel quite right. What I do when I notice that is I stop and I pause and check in with myself, because I know that my body is sending me messages that I need to take note of. It's really important that we don't dismiss the cues that our bodies are feeling. The next step is to ask ourselves questions. What's just happened that makes me feel like this? Was it the words that were said or the tone of voice? Was it the way someone spoke? Was it an idea or attitude that another person expressed? Do we feel a weight of expectation? Is someone demanding more of us than we can give? Are there thoughts and ideas, needs and feelings that we have that are being dismissed as invalid, passed over, ignored, or minimised? When we ask these kinds of questions, we get answers that we may not have considered before. The third step is to take a look back over our lives and identify the stories and narratives that we've lived with that have shaped the way we think. What have we been taught about our needs? Did we learn as children that our needs were not as important as those of our parents and siblings? Were we expected to pick up the slack when others in our family failed to do what was required? Are we held accountable for the shortcomings of others? What do we believe about the roles we should take because of our gender or our birth order? Stories are powerful drivers in our lives, and it's important to take them seriously because they have such a great impact on our lives and we often don't realise it. Once we've started to identify some of these narratives, we can begin to unpick the stories that no longer serve us and keep the ones that matter. Here are some questions for you to consider and write down on your identity page. What stories have you been told about who you are? How are they impacting the way you see yourself? Which of these stories do you want to continue to believe? On this page with the heart, around the heart, write 2 or 3 stories that you've been told about who you are. And then inside the heart, write at least one that is true, that you want to believe. Take a couple of moments now to do that. The reason that I do this is because the language of leadership is more about what we say to ourselves than what we say to others. You can't do that. How many times have you been told that? That you're too old, too young, not qualified enough, overqualified, told that we can't do something purely because of some external feature outside of our control. On this ability page, you'll see I've added a jigsaw with 4 pieces. I know a lot of us did jigsaws through lockdown, and many of us discovered or rediscovered just how much fun and infuriating jigsaws can be. So on this jigsaw, I want you to think of your top 4 abilities and write each one on a separate piece. These skills can be things that you've trained in, or maybe they have abilities that come naturally to you. But only write down the skills that you really enjoy using. Now, I could possibly change a tyre on a car, but I don't like doing it, so I always get someone else to do it. So choose 4 abilities that you do well, that you do easily, and that you enjoy being able to do. Take a couple of minutes, write them down. You know, it doesn't matter what you've written as your top 4 abilities. I want you to take a moment and celebrate that you can do these things. You might think they're very ordinary, but that doesn't matter. Very few of us have skills that are completely unique to us, but we do need to celebrate what we can do rather than always looking at the multitudes of things that we know that we can't. Now, when it comes to roles, many women struggle with a sense of perfectionism. And we've talked about changing that practice makes perfect mantra to practice makes progress. But what women do that men don't do is expect themselves to perfectly fit a role. And if they don't believe they can do it all, they don't want to do it at all. Whereas men will see that they've got, well, maybe 50% of the skills needed for a role and jump in with confidence. A study by Hewlett-Packard found that women only applied for a promotion when they believed they met 100% of the qualifications left for the job. Men were happy to apply when they thought they could meet 60% of the job requirements. Now, why do women second guess themselves this way? Generally, it's got nothing to do with self-confidence. Both men and women have issues around self-confidence. More often, it has to do with comparison. Women more readily compare themselves to men and to each other and then find themselves coming up short. This is why I'm so passionate about the work I do with women who lead, who must trust who we are. We must trust that. And we must trust what we can bring to the table. We need to stop comparing ourselves to others and start comparing ourselves to ourselves. Am I doing better today than I was yesterday? Am I making progress? Am I better at this task today than I was a week ago? What new thing have I learned today? What win have I had today? Practice means progress, or as a friend told me many years ago, put away the measuring tape. The language of leadership is all about how we talk to ourselves all day, every day, and changing the language that is not helpful. So now that we've looked at the abilities that you've identified, on this role page, there's a series of interconnected circles. I want you to take and write one of the abilities that you've listed on the jigsaw piece. Write it in that centre circle on the roles page. Now, I want you to think of the different jobs or roles where you've used that ability or where it's been useful. Now, this may be in a work situation, it may be in a home situation, in a social situation. It may have been that the job used the skill directly, or maybe the skill was transferred from another role. Things like the skills we learn. For those of us who are mothers, we have huge skills that we learn on the job. So take a couple of minutes to fill in the circles. There's a room for 8 roles. You may not be able to think of 8, but try to fill in at least 4. So now that we've looked at the varying roles that we've used for just one ability, think about what you're doing now. Are there abilities you can bring to this role that you haven't considered yet? In what ways may you be doubting that you're capable in a new role or business because you haven't yet connected the dots between the abilities you have and how they could be used in ways you haven't yet considered? Let's move into the third aspect of the language of leadership, healthy self-talk. One of the most helpful tools that I have been taught is clarity by contrast. It's a great tool for uncovering just what we say to ourselves, often without fully recognizing what we're doing. It's a tool I've used to let go of some really unhelpful messaging that's been shaping my own thinking and the actions for decades. So on this page, we're going to ask ourselves the question, what is my inner critic saying? Now, you know what that inner critic is. You know what that person's voice sounds like. It might be a male, it might be a female. I call my inner critic the examiner because he examines me and finds me wanting. So on this page, I want you to list all the things that you or your inner critic say to yourself on a regular basis, often the unhelpful or critical things. Don't hold back. The value in this is being honest with ourselves, because we can only change what we can see. What we don't write down can't be changed. So don't feel embarrassed. There's no guilt or shame about this, because we all do this. And don't be afraid. There's no moral value attached to these thoughts. They may not be helpful, but you're not a bad person, a failure, for having these thoughts. Every single one of us do so. But we don't have to let them rule our lives. Okay, take some time now. Right, I want you to get at least 5. You probably can get 10. One of the inner critic sayings that I have lived with for a long time, like I started my business. I went into business at the age of 60, and I'm the eldest in my family, and my brother and sister, who are younger, were moving into semi-retirement. And here am I, starting a business with no business knowledge at all. Transferable skills, yes, but no business knowledge at all. It's like, what was I thinking? My inner critic kept saying to me, you are too old to be doing this. Now, that's not helpful when this is something I really want to do, to have this little voice going, but you're too old, you're too old, you're too old. So what I did was I then flipped that. And that's what we're going to come to next, because we do need to be able to flip this to, what do I want to say? Now, for me, I wanted to change that narrative. So I wrote down, I crossed out the old narrative, what the inner critic was saying, and that's really important that we do that. Cross it out, because you're going to replace it with something that you want to say to yourself. And I wrote down, I'm just the right age to be doing this. And I said that new phrase to myself for about 2 weeks, so that every time I felt like that critic would come up and say, you're too old to be doing this, I'd go, I'm just the right age to be doing this. And you know what? I realised the truth of that, because I was doing other things in my life prior to turning 60. I had other things to deal with. I didn't have the time to do what I'm doing now. I am just the right age to be building my speaking and mentoring with business, working with women. I am just the right age. So take some time now. Look at what your inner critic is saying. Choose one statement, cross it out, and on this page, write what you want to say. Do that for 3 or 4 of them. Give it some time. Let's do this now. Now, once you've gone through all your inner critic sayings, cross them out and put down, what do I want to say? This is where the magic starts. So for at least the next week, if you can do it for 28 days, great. Say these positive thoughts out loud to yourself. I literally had them in a book and I would read them out loud to myself. First thing in the morning. If you can, say themselves to yourself in the mirror. You'll be surprised at how quickly those negative thoughts are replaced by positive ones when we practice them. And remember, practice makes progress. One strategy I used as I was starting this progress was when my inner critic would pop up with one of his regular thoughts, I'd catch myself saying, "Thanks for your input, but I don't agree with your ideas." Because really, our inner critic hasn't really been trying to sabotage us, even though that's often been the result. Our inner critic has been trying to keep us safe, but we don't need their help anymore. The final part of the language of leadership is learning the art of processing out loud. One of the ways in which I notice that I process things is by talking them through with a friend, usually another woman. And I've observed that there'll be times when something comes out of my mouth that is so profound that I stop and go, "Whoa, where did that come from?" Or I say something that is so clear that I haven't even thought of, but which is the crux or the heart of the problem, or maybe even the answer to a problem that's been going around and around in my head. You ever had that experience? I'm sure you have. I want us to celebrate this ability that we have as women to process things out loud. Too often we take for granted the things we do naturally or instinctually. But just because they come naturally to us or easily to us doesn't mean that we should take them for granted or dismiss them as unimportant. Then on the flip side, I'm sure you've found at some time that perhaps you've gone to a significant male in your life with an issue you've been trying to work through, and what they want to do is fix it straight away. They want to find the solution or give you that quick fix. And when that fix isn't quite right, they can get frustrated or even angry with us because we haven't been clear enough about what the problem is. The real problem is that we don't want them to fix our problems. We want them to listen to us so that we can sort through the problem for ourselves and come up with our own solutions. Am I right? So let's work through this process that we do instinctually and break it down into its three main steps. So the first thing is to say things out loud. Don't be afraid to say things out loud. You're not a fruitcake if you talk to yourself. If you don't have a female friend you can talk things through with. Articulating the issues out loud is not a sign of madness. One of the benefits of saying out loud in that safe place, the things that have been percolating in your head, is that emotions can bubble up that you don't realise are there. It's not always the ideas that need some space. It can be the emotions as well. Just need some fresh air. Allowing our emotions to have space in this way can be confronting, especially when we've not been aware that there's any sort of emotion attached to the things that we've been thinking about. But as we talk about the bubbling ideas, don't be afraid if some emotion comes up, because our emotions can tell us so much that our heads haven't yet caught up with. Our emotions can tell us that we're afraid, we're angry, we're frustrated. I remember a recent occasion when my business coach, whom I've known for a few years and feel very safe with, asked me to think through a particular question. So I just started talking because I didn't know what it was that I actually thought about the issue that she raised. As I spoke, I felt emotions bubbling up and found it hard to talk as the emotions got stronger. But as I persevered, I realised that these emotions ran so deep and that what I was articulating were some ideas that I'd had in my head for a long time, many of them frustrations that I had because what I felt deeply wasn't being allowed to come to the surface. And excuse me, I'm going to swear. In the friendliest way possible, I said, "Fuck you," to my coach, and she laughed with me because even though this was tough and I felt drained, the ideas and emotions that had come up were deep from my heart and I needed to take note of them and build my work on them. The second thing that happens when we say things out loud is that we get real clarity because we actually hear what it is that we've been thinking. Now, I don't know about you, but the little voice in my head can get quite manic at times as it spins and spins and weaves its ideas around, and I can end up feeling confused. But when I say out loud what is going on around and around in my head, that manic voice has to stop and listen, because someone else is speaking, and the someone is me. So one of the benefits of actually saying something out loud, either to ourselves or to a trusted friend, is we stop the hamster wheel that spins around in our heads. We may still have the manic voice, and we give our thoughts the space that they deserve, and that manic voice is allowed to be stilled, and we give those thoughts a place of honour that they deserve, because they don't deserve to be on that hamster wheel with the little manic voice saying, run, run, run. Our thoughts and ideas need to be out in the open so we can look at them and decide which ones we can let go. The second step is to listen to what you've just said. Listen to what you're really saying. I'm a great proponent of what we say out loud goes back into our heads via our ears to convince us all over again. This can work in a positive way when we say out loud the ideas and thoughts we've been working through. Listening to them can bring real clarity. Oh, that's what I really mean. This is also a bit like a rehearsal. I'm sure you've all rehearsed things in your head when you must have a difficult conversation with someone. Doing this gives us clarity and the ability to speak with less emotion. We get to say what is really important to us. But doing the same type of rehearsal out loud has the added advantage of hearing back what we're actually saying. We ask ourselves, does this make sense? Is this what I really want to say? Have I left anything out? We literally hear what we've missed. But saying things out loud can also have a negative impact if what we're saying is derogatory towards ourselves. How many of us berate ourselves when we think we've failed, especially in a relatively easy or minor task? My mum's favourite thing to say to herself was, "You silly woman." Now, my mum was not silly at all, but she told herself this on a regular basis. So check what you say out loud to yourself. Is it helpful? Is it positive? Or is it dragging you down? Do you have a favourite put-down statement that you regularly use on yourself? Might be good to take note of it and see how often you say it. One of the things I check with myself are the words "good girl" if I've accomplished something. Being a good girl was such a strong part of my childhood, to the extent that I tried to please my parents in so many ways in the hope that they'd say they were proud of me or even that they loved me. But I'm no longer a girl. So when I'm pleased with something that I've achieved, I say, well done. Now, the third step is to think, is this bringing us clarity or confusion? When we think about what we've just said out loud, either to ourselves or to a friend, are we clearer about what we've been thinking about or an idea, or are we still feeling just as confused? If it's brought clarity, that's really great. But if you're still confused, you know you need to do a bit more processing. You haven't yet got to the heart. So again, it's either you can do it on your own or with someone you trust. Talking out an issue with a trusted person allows us to not only hear what we think, but allows the other person to add their thoughts and give us a perspective we may not have considered. We also have the opportunity to be confirmed in what we think and want to say. Hearing an opposing or different point of view can allow us to modify what we think or confirm that what we've said is really what we mean, because both outcomes are positive. So this brings us to the end of our masterclass. Sometimes there might be questions coming up or some comments that you've had. I'd love to hear from you. pop me an email at info@bronwilliams.com. I'd love to know what it is that stood out for you in this masterclass. Now, would you like to take this further? Because I know that as a woman, there is so much more to us than meets the eye. We have a wealth of wisdom, power, and strength within us, and often all we need is a little support to tap into it. And that's why I'm really excited about the next session of the Roundtable Group Mentoring for Women that I'm facilitating. The Roundtable Group Mentoring is designed for women who want to connect with others, share their experiences, and tap into their own wisdom and power. So whether you're a young mum navigating, or maybe someone who's navigating a difficult time, or you're thinking of shifting something in your business or personal life, this group is the right place for you, to support you. I've experienced the power of women supporting each other firsthand. When I was a young mum, I found comfort and guidance from older mothers who'd been through similar circumstances. When I went through a divorce, there was one woman who walked the journey with me and provided support when I needed it most. And as I've built my business, I've been grateful for the women who have shared their wisdom and insight with me. These are the things that I love about what women do for each other, and why I'm bringing the Roundtable Group Mentoring to its next session starting in September. I know what it's like to need other women. I know what it's like to be able to help other women. And this group is designed for women to do both, to tap into their own power, to plug into the power of others, and rediscover the power that has always been within them. This is a 3-month program. It's quite structured. We will meet weekly online for about 90 minutes. Each month we'll have a different focus. The first month is change. The second month is conflict. And the third month is communication. First week of each month, we're having the learning table where I'll be bringing some specific training. Second week is a guest at the table, where I will be inviting a guest speaker to share their wisdom and insight. The third week is what's under the table, where we'll unpick how we think and make decisions. And the last week of each month will be flipping the tables, where you'll get to ask me anything, bring your expertise, bring a problem to the group for a collective wisdom. If you'd like to talk further about this, you want to explore whether this could be something to help you make the progress that you're looking for, send me an email at info@bronwilliams.com and we can set up a time to talk. I also have a Facebook group, and I know some of you probably have been in that, but it's called A Seat at the Table because I believe women are tired of waiting for other people to give them a seat at the table. So we're building our own tables and asking others to join us. So just Google Facebook group Seat at the Table, ask to join, and you can become part of the community there as well. I'm so glad you took the time to be part of this masterclass. As I said before, I'd love to hear what was helpful for you, what you've learned, maybe something you'd like to have learned but I didn't cover. Enjoy your time learning the language of leadership. Use it well for yourself and for those that you lead. As I look back on a chapter of my life from many years ago, a time when my then husband confessed his infidelity, I'm struck by the stark contrast between the person I was then and the woman I've become. In those days, my voice was merely an echo of the expectations that were placed on me by my upbringing and the norms that I'd internalised since childhood. if I could transport the strength and conviction I possess now back to that moment, the narrative would have been vastly different. The pain of betrayal would still have cut deep, but I would have shown my former husband the door without hesitation, protecting the sanctity of our home and the well-being of our youngest son. Back then, my voice was shaped by the expectation to accommodate, to submerge my own needs and values beneath the weight of societal expectations. I was devastated, yet when my ex-husband urged me to keep the revelation hushed until he'd spoken to our church pastor, I obediently followed his directive. It wasn't in my nature then to confront or to demand accountability. My voice wasn't my own. It echoed that of others, harmonising with the values I'd been taught. Looking back, I realised that my ex-husband's way of operating was to bury issues, hoping they would vanish with time. Reflecting on that situation now, it's clear that waiting for him to take the initiative was futile. I had to raise the issues myself and force his hand. My voice back then lacked the strength and self-assuredness it holds today. My younger self believed she had to play small in the idea that her voice held little value. And I owe her kindness and compassion because she simply didn't know any better. She hadn't been taught to stand up for herself, to assert her rights, or to speak her truth. The narrative prescribed submissiveness, quietness, and downplaying her values. Even if I had possessed my current strength, I might have still desired reconciliation, but with a condition: that my ex-husband would only be welcome back if he figured out why he strayed. I don't know why I did it, wouldn't have sufficed. The imperative was for him to delve into his own way of thinking and understand the roots of his actions. In speaking up and eventually telling my husband I was leaving, I was stepping into my power for the first time. It was a leap into the unknown, a daunting journey into an uncertain future. Yet even with a shaky voice and uncertainty, I spoke the truth that was essential for my life. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I see that every voice, no matter how small or wavering, is significant. Today I stand on a much larger platform, aware that there are countless women whose voices are stifled, who have been conditioned to play small. Whether our voices are soft or they resonate loudly, we can speak our truth. In shaping the world of the 21st century, we must recognise the value, validity and necessity of our voices. It's through these voices that we can bring about real change.
Thanks for being part of this masterclass and watching it online with me. I know I've raised a number of different issues around how we use our voice, how we speak to ourselves as women who are leaders. And if anything here has raised concerns for you, if you'd like to know more, please reach out to me. The QR code there is for you to use. That'll take you directly through to my website, and you can send me a message via my website. You may also like to head over to my website. I've got lots of really interesting information there, more information about women and their leadership. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can see the link there on the screen. Please head over there, Connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got lots of resources on LinkedIn as well. And of course, if you've been looking at this on YouTube, you will know that there are lots of resources, lots of interesting information, positive, strengthening, powerful information for women who are really seeking to grow themselves as leaders, whether that's in the corporate space, in their own businesses, as a mum looking after children. It doesn't really matter. I believe women are leaders wherever they turn up in life. So, love to support you in your journey as a woman who is a leader.